Here's the strange part, and I want to say it plainly before anything else. The 8,000 warriors aren't the mystery. They're the guards. What they stand watch over is a tomb that sat sealed for more than 2,000 years, one we've found, mapped, and walked across the top of, and chosen not to open. We already know, roughly, what's inside. We're deliberately leaving it there. And the reason is far stranger, and far more human than any curse. Start with the accident, because almost none of this was meant to be found. In March of 1974, a small group of farmers outside the city of Xi'an were digging a well, looking for water in a dry field. One of them, a man named Yangtze, drove his spade into something hard. What came up wasn't water. It was a life-sized human head made of fired clay, staring back at him out of the soil. He'd punched a hole straight through the roof of the largest army ever buried, and not one living person had known it was there. What they uncovered over the following years is hard to hold in your head. More than 8,000 soldiers, arranged for battle in long underground corridors. 130 chariots, over 600 horses. Archers kneeling, infantry standing, officers behind. And here's the detail that stops people cold. No two faces are alike. Every warrior got his own features, his own expression, his own hair tied in its own knot, as if the sculptors weren't making an army but a portrait of one. They were painted, too, once, in bright reds and blues and purples and greens. Those flat gray clay men you see in the photographs. That's not how they were meant to look at all. And that paint is the first warning of what we're dealing with. When the warriors came out of the ground, some still carried their original color. It didn't last. Out in the dry open air, the paint started to curl within about 15 seconds. Within roughly 4 minutes, the painted layer dried, lifted, and flaked off. And the color that had survived 2,000 years in the dark was just gone, in about the time it takes to boil an egg. The archaeologists stood there and watched it happen, and there was nothing they could do. Now, the warriors are only the outer ring. They face east, toward the lands the emperor once conquered, and they're guarding something about 1.5 miles away. A hill. A great flat-topped mound of rammed earth, once around 115 meters tall, still over 70 today, covering a site of some 56 square kilometers. Under that hill lies the tomb of the man who ordered all of it. Qin Shi Huang, first emperor of a unified China, the ruler who linked the early walls into the ancestor of the Great Wall and standardized the writing, the money, even the width of the roads. He started building his tomb the year he took the throne, a boy of 13, and by the old accounts, more than 700,000 workers labored on it. That mound's never been opened. Not once in 22 centuries. So what's inside? For most of history, the only answer came from a single source, and it read like a legend. About a century after the emperor died, the historian Sima Qian described the tomb in his Records of the Grand Historian. He wrote of a whole underground palace. He wrote that the craftsmen filled it with flowing mercury, shaped into the 100 rivers of China, the Yangtze and the Yellow River, running down into a great sea, and that the mercury was somehow kept in motion. Overhead, the ceiling was worked with the heavens, the sun and moon and stars. He wrote of crossbows rigged to fire on their own at anyone who broke in, and lamps of whale oil meant to burn forever. For 2,000 years, that was just a story. A gorgeous, extravagant story nobody could check. Except we did check it, and that's the moment it stops being a myth and turns into something colder. When researchers tested the soil of the burial mound, they found mercury. Not a trace, but a strong, unmistakable signal, well above the natural background of the land around it. And the pattern is what raised the hair on people's necks. The mercury wasn't spread evenly. It ran highest in exactly the spots you'd expect the rivers and the sea to sit if you laid Sima Qian's description over the map. The distribution even seems to echo the shape of China itself. A story written a century after the fact, brushed off for 2,000 years, and now the ground quietly backs it up. There really does seem to be a sea of mercury under that hill. Which brings us back to where we started. We can find the chamber. The technology's there, the ground-penetrating surveys, the core samples, the mercury readings, and in a real sense we could dig tomorrow. So why has no government, in a country that would love nothing more than to unveil the intact palace of its first emperor, ever given the order? The answer comes in 3 parts, and not one of them is superstition. First, that mercury. Estimates of what's down there run as high as 100 tons, and the moment you breach the chamber, it starts turning to vapor, poisonous and hard to contain. Second, the sheer scale, a tomb complex the size of a small city, buried under a mountain of earth you'd need a generation to move. And third, the one that matters most, and you've already watched it happen. Remember the paint that vanished in 4 minutes. Because that's the real lesson of the Terracotta Warriors. We're not held back by a legend or a trap. What holds us back is the humility of knowing what we'd wreck. Whatever's under that hill, the silks, the bronzes, the lacquer, the things we can't even guess at, is sitting in a sealed, stable darkness right now. And the instant we let the air in, some of it starts to die, the same way the color died on the soldiers. China's policy on its imperial tombs has basically become one sentence: don't open what you can't yet save. Preserve first. Dig only when you've got no other choice. And for the first emperor's tomb, that day hasn't come. So here's where it leaves us, and it isn't the ending people expect. The mystery of Qin Shi Huang's tomb isn't unsolved. It's deliberately unopened. We know there's a palace down there. We've got good reason to believe there's a mechanical sea of mercury and a ceiling of stars, built for a man so afraid of dying that he sent expeditions to hunt for a drug of eternal life, and who ended up swallowing mercury tonics that may have helped kill him. His immortal palace is real, and it's waiting, intact, under a green hill in central China. And the most advanced, most powerful thing we've learned to do with it is leave it alone. That's not failure. It might be the most grown-up decision archaeology has ever made. The question was never really whether we can open the first emperor's tomb. It's whether we're wise enough not to, until we can do it without turning his eternity to dust.